Hello. Welcome to the Death by Disney podcast. I'm your host, Adam, and I have set my goal for this podcast to review all of Walt Disney films' productions from the beginning from Snow White until Wish, Marvel films, Touchstone Pictures, anything connected to the Disney company and a film I will watch. Right now, I'm on movie 26, which is Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. It was released in 1955. It's a Western from Walt Disney Productions, of course. It is an edited and recut compilation of the first three episodes of the Davy Crockett miniseries. Um, yeah, it stars Fess Parker, I believe his name is, and we'll get into how I feel about the film in one moment, but I always like to give you some trivia to give you a little bit of context about the film. So, this is all gleaned from the Internet Movie Database. The first bit of trivia is that this is the most successful early example of merchandise licensing, hard word to say, the sale of various types of Crockett paraphernalia, including coonskin caps and bubblegum cards. And this kind of reminds me of an interesting phenomenon that happens where media is produced for children of a certain generation, but it references things that their parents would have seen as children. And I'm thinking of two examples. The first example is in Back to the Future, which is crazy that that's a classic film nowadays, but that's a movie I grew up watching a lot as a kid. So in Back to the Future, the first one, he obviously goes back to the 1950s, and his uncle has a Davy Crockett hat, and he's watching. I'm not even sure if it's the Davy Crockett show, but he's watching television with his Davy Crockett hat. And when I was watching that, I was like, that's kind of ridiculous. Why would a suburban kid be wearing a raccoon skin hat? And it was only later that I came to realize that it was connected to this Davy Crockett phenomenon. And I never actually saw the series or the movies when I was a kid, but the song kind of worked its way into my brain and I was aware of the character, so I was able to connect it after my 20th rewatching of Back to the Future or something like that. And a more interesting, maybe not more interesting, but a more recent example is in the Young Sheldon series. Missy, who is the sister of young Sheldon, of the Sheldon character, she really loves Alf in the beginning because it's set exactly during this time when I was growing up. So she really loves Alf. She wants to marry Alf. She writes letters to Alf. And then later, when she's a teenager, she still loves Alf, right? Like, it's pretty obvious that that is a character that really stuck with her. And my son, for some reason, decided he watched a couple of episodes of Young Sheldon and then he really liked it, so he binged it. And it was like the first he's 11. It's the first show that he really, really loved, so he binged it. And so there's this Alf part, and then I realized he has no idea who Alf is. That's just like a throwaway line. So there's got to be some kind of name for that phenomenon where there's like callbacks to media that the parents of the children who are watching the entertainment would like. I'm not sure in the Young Sheldon case if that is for the children or for the adults because, I don't think Young Sheldon is necessarily directed towards 11-year-olds, but it might be actually. It does have a lot of themes, especially with the kids, that are relatable to children. But anyway, back to Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. The film made $1 million, which, and this is 1955, that's a lot of money. Despite the fact that over 50% of the US had already seen it on TV, the reviews and promotional materials gave no indication that this was a compilation of David Crockett, Indian Fighter, and Davy Crockett at the Alamo. The only difference between the TV and movie versions was that the movie was in color. A ABC TV, which first aired Disneyland in 1954, did not broadcast in color at the time. And that's also another interesting phenomenon. This is why I love this project. You think you get to you watch kind of weird time capsule movies that nobody has revisited in a long time. But you also get to think about other things like how media and how culture has changed. It would be kind of crazy if a film studio put out a film that they had already released on television. One, because usually television is now streaming mostly, so you can get a lot of stuff that they release through streaming platforms, but then I guess they kind of did that during the pandemic as well. But just to have and not tell anybody about it. Like I can understand during the pandemic they were like, okay, we're gonna release what was the Black Widow movie, which is an alright movie, but nobody really saw it because it was released during the pandemic, and they were like, okay, we're gonna release it in theaters and on streaming. So yeah, they made people quite aware of that fact. But they weren't like, oh yeah, we're gonna release the new Loki movie in cinemas this summer, and you go, and it's like just edited from the TV series, which is a great series by the way, but that would be a little bit disappointing. So that's exactly what they did, and I think if they did that now, there would be such big protests. People would be really really angry about that, but there didn't seem to be too much backlash. They were like, oh yeah, yeah, we watched it on TV, but now it's in color, so it's better. All right, that is a little bit about the trivia, and now I'm going to tell you what I actually think about this film. This is my review, written shortly after I watched it. This movie was put together out of 3 episodes of a television series, and it shows. It's clearly divided into 3 parts, and the acting is the kind of over the top that is often found in children's entertainment. This can be funny at times, so the film does provide a little mirth. While its depictions of the Creek people are horribly racist, it manages to do a far better job with this issue than does Peter Pan. This is rooted in the fact that Crockett, for his time, was progressive when it came to relations with Native people of North America. He vehemently opposed the Indian Removal Acts put forward by Andrew Jackson. This was a policy of ethnic cleansing, so removing the natives so the white settlers could have good land. It was widely popular at the time, and Crockett's opposition to it led to the end of his political career. He decided to go to Texas. He was killed in the Alamo. The movie sticks very closely to the real history for most. It's an interesting cultural artifact, so it isn't a complete waste of time. And on the list of the movies I've watched, it's 27 out of 78. So not a bad ranking, a kind of middle of the road movie, and I give it an 8 out of 10 stars. And there's a couple of interesting things to talk about with that, because there's this idea that 1950s culture really sort of romanticized the colonial West, and there was this fight between cowboys and Indians. But David Crockett is an interesting character because obviously he's a frontiersman and obviously he's a settler, but he had conflicted feelings about this whole situation, and he realized that what his government was doing was not great, and he took a principled stand against that kind of thing. And this film is depicted in the sort of racial stereotypes of the time, so it's kind of easy to overlook the fact. And is he a white savior kind of guy? No, because he doesn't end up saving anybody. He objects to the treatment of fellow human beings. because that's the kind of person he was. Uh, his motivations in real life for going to the Alamo are kind of vague and muddy. He seemed like he thought that it was a good idea at the time. And, maybe he was just looking for adventure and he died. And there's another movie. He dies in this movie, by the way. Well, actually, spoiler alert. I mean, spoiler alert for a real historical person that's been dead for over 200 years, probably, and a film that is almost 100 years old. Yeah, so the real Davy Crockett dies, but at the end, it's made like, did he die? Is he still out there? Because they have more television shows that are going on. And Walt Disney said that if I had known this was my television series about Davy Crockett was going to be so popular, I would have not killed him. Okay, so that is my review of Davy Crockett, but other people have some other opinions, and this is one of them. 2 out of 10 from Matthew Silverhammer 28, March 2020. Stock footage of wild animals, unabashed colonialism, possessive sexism, all made better by a truly lame white savior hero. However, it does have the following quote: "My father can lick any man in Kentucky, and I can lick my father, so it's not all bad." All right, calm down. Uh, you know, I think I didn't say this earlier about when I was discussing the white hero savior thing. You could make a very good movie or even television series about Davy Crockett, like the real person, and all his complexities and his environment, and the Andrew Jackson thing, like, Donald Trump's favorite president. Although I think in that case, he probably just heard that Andrew Jackson was a populist, and he's like, I'm a populist, though I love Andrew Jackson. Probably doesn't know anything about Andrew Jackson, honestly, to Trump's credit, or discredit, because he doesn't know a lot about a lot of things. Don't come at me, guys. Yeah, I probably should edit that out. But if you at this point you still have any respect for Donald Trump, you have drunk the Kool-Aid. Yeah, but yeah, I think it would be a very, very good thing to do. Unfortunately, Davy Crockett is not like they do this with Napoleon all the time. Like there's right as I'm recording this, there's a new Napoleon film out. They kind of always reimagine Napoleon, or because he's this huge influential figure in history, and there are people who he was influential, but not as influential as Napoleon, obviously. But there are people like Davy Crockett whose lives are so interesting, and it would be interesting to have a more modern perspective on his life. So, yeah. The next review, 10 out of 10, from El Scutero 5, February 2005. And I just included this because this is a wild ride. Sit down and get ready for this. Have loved this film, flaws and all, since it came out in 1955! Exclamation point. I first saw this movie over the 3 Sunday nights it ran on, capitalized letters, The Wonderful World of Color, as the Disney show was called, and fell head over heels with the character of Davy. He was so honest and good to my 5-year-old mind, and now, 50 brackets 50 exclamation point question mark exclamation point question mark exclamation point question mark brackets years later, I still admire the man and all he stood for. I was living in San Antonio, Texas at the time these 3 shorts came out, so I had my parents take me to the Alamo after the last installment, and today I own a Model 1816 flintlock musket that was carried by a Mexican soldier in the second wave of the morning assault of March 6, 1836. The soldier, Edward Escallion's great-grandson, furnished me written provenance from his grandmother, who died in 1924, that her father had carried this particular rifle in the assault, and when he mustered out of the army after San Jacinto, he brought it with him when he emigrated to the U.S., Texas, of course, in 1838, and documents the history of the weapon during the battle. And it is in fine shape for a rifle that's 179 years old and is still very accurate, though only maybe 5 to 75 yards. And the tie-in to this film is obvious. And yes, I sometimes sit with the rifle in my hands when I watch the Now DVD that just came out and think about the history of the whole scene. Oh my god. There's so much to unpack about what I just read you. First of all, let's start from the end and then go back. So he's just sitting there in his living room with this ancient musket watching television. Like, does he load it? Is he ready to fire at the Americans? Oh, that's so crazy. Then he says that he emigrates to Texas, to the United States in 1838. And I think Texas, hold on. What was Texas in 1837? This is always great to do online. Oh, Texas was independent. Yeah, so Texas had declared independence in 1835. So he says that's the weird part about the story. Like, I mean, there's so many weird parts about the story, but one weird part is that this relative of the guy who had the musket emigrates to the United States in 1838, but the United States, Texas wasn't part of the United States in 1838, so that's kind of a weird thing. And so basically what I'm saying is I think that this old man got scammed and he paid a lot of money for this very old musket. And probably it is a real old musket, but how would you know exactly that it was used in the Alamo? Like, so the musket, if he's telling the truth, was created in 1816, and so the Battle of the Alamo was before, it was in 1836, so this musket is already 20 years old. So, I mean, kind of realistic because you probably would have muskets that old, but not entirely. And then, so you know the name of the soldier who had the musket, and then this musket belongs to his great great grandson, and he has a note from his grandmother that this is the real musket that was used in the Alamo. It just sounds like this guy had an old musket that he wanted to sell, and then he found somebody who was really obsessed with the history of the Alamo, and he said, "Hey, I have this musket. You wanna pay a lot of money for it?" And he was like, "Sure." So yeah, it's not often on this podcast we discover a scam. So that was a scam, sir. That was a scam. Anyway, back to the movie. It's kind of enjoyable. It's all right. It's more enjoyable for sort of looking at the historical context of all of these things that happened, both in terms of American colonial history and also in terms of American pop culture history and Disney's influence on American pop culture in the 1950s. And this is something that I'm not really talking about a lot because I'm focusing more on the movies, but Disney really had a big influence on the history of television. So it's interesting for both of those reasons. So thank you for listening to this podcast all the way to the end. Please subscribe, please leave a review, tell your friends about it, follow me on Spotify. All of those things are good. Next week's episode is also a very interesting movie called Lady and the Tramp. You may have heard of that one, so tune in next week for that episode. Thank you and bye.